Hey everyone, we're on the horn here on the Zoom or not Zoom, we're on the podcastle with Michael Odupitan. So I met Michael. I don't even know how long it's been. It's been really weird because like when I'm talking with Danielle, we're like, oh my gosh, has it been like whatever, like 3 years, 4 years? Like it's crazy on how fast time flies. And what I have found is that Michael and I are kindred spirits. And so in a lot of different mindset for leadership, and you have to lead yourself first, to personal growth, to professional growth. And so Michael has a lot going on. And what inspires me most about Michael is like where he came from to what he went through to build something and where he's currently at and what he's excited about. So I just wanted to start with that just quick thing on Michael, but then maybe talk a little bit about Michael's opinion and kind of like where our history real quick and then go into your history.
Yeah, man, it's been, well, first let me say thank you for having me on the podcast, and I'm
Yeah.
super proud of you for taking this leap yourself, for, stepping out there and starting this journey. But like I said, we met, I want to say it was about 2 or 3 years ago, honestly, when me and Danielle was on our journey trying to figure out how we serve in the community with helping individuals become more healthy with our Move Fitness Boot Camp. And so we started going around trying to figure out how can we find the different resources in the community and then have those resources available so that way people had access to them and was able to know what was going on. And then we stumbled upon SoFire and was like, man, what do they do? And then it was like, somebody was like, they serve healthy drinks.
Yeah.
And so I was like, Daniel, let's just go in there and let's talk to them. And then we went in there and we ordered some drinks. And then we said, what do you guys do? And then I think that led to a conversation. You
Yeah.
guys took us in the back room and then we got to a conversation,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
and then the rest was history. We started to really understand that we were more alike than what we thought as far as just initial conversation. And I think that's
Right.
the beauty of it all is just being able to engage in conversation and you find out about people and then you realize how much you have in common with people when you just take that initial step
Yeah.
get to know somebody. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah. And then it just kind of got up and going. And what fascinates me is like when you tell me your stories about kind of where you came from. So let's talk about going all the way back to Miami. So start there.
Yeah, so I'm originally from West Palm Beach, and I grew up very, very humble beginnings, and I think I tell you the story all the time. But like, I didn't really have much, and even in the time of growing up, man, you couldn't have told me that I was poor at the time because no one in my community really knew what poor was because we all were, and so everybody just really just kind of did the best that they could, and I lived a pretty happy life, honestly. Even though the neighborhoods and things like that was pretty rough, but when you in a certain environment, and we talk about this all the time, and I think this is the thing that really kind of got us going because I was like, man, we go off this thing called the allegory of the cave,
Yeah.
and then we kind of went into all this stuff. So we were growing up, I was in my own cave. What I knew is what I knew. The illusions of the world that I thought I understood at the time was all that I knew. So had an opportunity to get out of that, but growing up in, like you said, drugs, shootings, poverty, low income house, all those different things, man. Like no one would really know who you are today unless they ask questions about where you come from. So I appreciate understanding that. My whole time growing up in West Palm Beach, I kept telling myself and one of my best friends that I had to get out. Like that was the goal. It didn't matter where I went because of all the things that were going on. It just required me to get somewhere different to know that there was more opportunity for me. And so during the time of my senior year, a number of different kids in our community, drugs became a pretty prevalent thing in our community. Everybody started to get their hands on guns, and people start to shoot each other left and right. And so a lot of those people end up being some of my friends. So we said, what are we going to do to get out of here before this happens to one of us?
Right.
And so we just practiced and did all the things that we needed to do, knowing that sports was going to be our outlet. And so we did everything we could to get a scholarship and end up getting a scholarship to Southern Illinois. Was supposed to go to Marshall University. Went to Southern Illinois, got there, and it was too cold for me to be there.
Uh-huh.
So I told coach, hey man, send me back home because I can't do this weather. He sent me back home, and at that surprise when I got back, man, I had lost like 4 or 5 friends in that process, just being away for about 6 months. And so I was like, yeah, I definitely got to get out of here.
And
So
and for clarification, when you say lose 4 or 5 friends, that isn't because you left and then came back. You when you say lose, like define lose those 4 or 5 friends.
yeah, yeah. So when I left, there was a there was a shooting that happened in our neighborhood that sparked a little bit of a gang war, and there was a lot of retaliation happening behind that shooting. And so when that one shooting happened, a number of different shootings happened, and then I lost about 4 or 5 friends in the midst of all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I mean by loss: people losing their lives to gun violence. And so, again, being so closely connected to so many people, it was what was I going to do to make sure that that didn't happen to me?
Right.
And so I
Got it.
called my coach and I said, "Hey, man, is there anywhere that you can send me? Um, I don't care where it's at." And he said, "Yeah, I got a place," and it was Topeka, Kansas.
Topeka, yeah.
Kansas. So I remember when he told me, I was like, "Man, where is Topeka, Kansas?" I couldn't even identify it on the map, but it was whatever I needed to do to get out. And so I ended up coming to Topeka, Kansas, and my best friend ended up going to Troy State. And yeah, the rest is history. So we're here now. Been here since 2002,
Hmm.
and it's just been it's been an eye opening experience, a little bit of a culture shock, but that's was the first step of me getting out of that cave.
Okay. So you show up at Washburn University,
Mhm.
and I remember you had talked to me about a book you read, and I can't remember, was it at Washburn or before you came to Washburn?
It was actually while I was at Washburn, it wasn't in the curriculum. It was a book that I just happened to pick up at the bookstore.
And what do you remember what book that was?
The book was called The Empire of Illusion by Chris Hudges. I picked up this book because when I got to college, I was not an avid reader. I barely could read. And when I got to college and they put all of the curriculum in front of me and said, "Hey, you have to read these books," I was
Hmm.
like, "Man, I got to figure out how to start to read." And I picked up this book at the library, not really knowing what the content was going to do for me. But it was in that book where I was introduced to the allegory of the cave by Chris Hudges, and the illusion of life, and talking about how we can expand our perceptions of the world if we only gain more knowledge to be able to expand that perception.
Right. And so now I want to give everybody perspective. So Michael and we've jammed one time, and we're like, we were even doing a like a class together, like a test class. And one of the things that was interesting about you and I think there was another 2 or 3 people in that class that actually mentioned like there was a book that changed their perspective with something.
Mhm.
And so, like for myself, I always tell people I read one book from kindergarten to 12th grade, and it was like a science fiction book. Didn't read any other books. In college, I avoided reading at all cost, and I didn't know like I had issues with. I didn't know till later in life I had issues with dyslexia,
Mhm.
attention deficit. Like I didn't know that, but that's the reason why I hated reading. But then I read one book and it changed my perspective for me as far as entrepreneurship and the way that I think about how to live my life by design.
Mhm.
Right. So you were saying this book changed your perspective, but people are seeing you who you are right now. They're seeing a guy with a hat. I have some, is that a polo emblem like on the hat? Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So like in a collared shirt. But I want to give people the visual perspective of what you looked like while you were reading that book. So tell me about that. So what did
Yeah.
you physically look like?
At the time, probably
Yeah.
I was just growing. So when I came to Kansas, I couldn't find anybody to cut my hair the way I wanted to cut my hair. So in the culture of where I grew up, a lot of individuals wear dreadlocks. And so I just had started my journey of growing dreads. So I looked like a little bit of like Hellraiser, a little bit. I had all these little dreads sticking out of my head. And then over time, they got fairly long. But yeah, I was very into the culture of where I grew up.
Right.
Um, and understanding. And again, not saying that it's a bad thing. You can wear your hair however you choose to wear your hair, but I was definitely in a space where I was modeling what I saw in my community
Yeah.
become the person that I thought or I viewed as a successful person and what that looked like to me.
Right.
And again, I wouldn't, if I had the opportunity, if I could grow hair, I'd probably grow dreads again. But that doesn't, I mean, the hair doesn't define a person, but it was the person that I was becoming. But it just
Sure.
had a different connotation based off the culture and the place that I lived.
Yeah, and I think you even told me this because I always like to. I was like, I'm very visual. I think you even said you had like a gold grill or something like that.
Chain, had the grill in, gold chain necklace with the praying
Yeah,
hands,
yeah,
all of it. Yeah, for
right,
sure.
right. So we've got that picture of Michael. He comes to Topeka. He reads this book, and then him and I talked about this thing like the allegory of the cave, and it's a way to almost be awakened from an existing perspective that you've had. And then the further allegory of the cave is we're actually always in a perpetual cave. We're always in a perpetual perception of what we believe life is like today until we learn something new tomorrow. Agreed?
Mhm. Agreed.
Right. So you're this guy that comes in from his culture. You're a transplant. You come into Topeka, Kansas culture, and Michael's just trying to make friends in the dorm. And they're like, I don't know what to do. Like, this guy's kind of scary. But Michael's becoming very astute. He's learning, he's educating, he's increasing his awareness, and he just wants to hang out with people that want to stay out of trouble.
Mhm.
Right. Right. Okay. So you're at Washburn, you're playing football, then something kind of derails what you thought was going to happen.
Well, I wouldn't even say derail, man. Just really, what we were coming from West Palm Beach. Even though I grew up in a predominantly black neighborhood, I had all types of friends. You know, you name it, man. There's Jamaican, there's Haitian, there's Cuban, there's Dominican. Um, there's all types of people. So it's a melting pot. And so when I got to Topeka, it was very black and white, especially
Yeah.
at Washburn.
Yeah.
It wasn't even really Hispanic culture on campus, really. And so one of the things that really shook my world a little bit, as you said, we were transitioning and trying to figure out how to acclimate into this climate, was trying to get to know people. And so we had a hard time getting to know the other students at Washburn. I came here with 6 other guys from Florida, so we were our own bunch, and as that bunch, we spoke our own language because Florida has its own language,
Yeah.
and so people had a hard time understanding what we were saying and how we articulated words, and we were just different. And you talking about not just me, but 6 other guys, football players with dreadlocks.
Yeah.
And so we would go up to people and try to make friends, and it just wasn't working. So we said we were going to do something to get people to get to know us. So we went to every dorm room, knocked on doors, and introduced ourselves. And imagine opening that door and seeing 6 buff black dudes with dreadlocks and gold chains and possibly gold teeth trying to introduce themselves to you at that point, especially what we found out in the process where a lot of those youth or those kids at the time were not from Topeka. They
Right.
were from Western Kansas.
Yes.
And which I didn't, which was
Right.
unbeknownst to me, right? Like coming from Western Kansas, there's very little black people in Western
That's
Kansas, if
right.
any, in some of those neighborhoods. So that was the thing that really changed my perception of people because I had the mindset that black people was everywhere.
Hmm.
But then to really get to the point of understanding that, and at the time we thought Topeka was pretty racist, but to the understanding that it wasn't that people were racist, it was just a lack of understanding. And
Sure.
so we didn't understand their perception. They didn't understand our perception until we gained understanding of each other. Then that changed our world and our opportunity to connect with people. And
Right.
so I think that's what's been the most beneficial thing that has happened to me in this transition to Kansas is learning to take the time to get to know other people so you understand where they're coming from and how to then engage with them based off, maybe what you thought versus what you know.
Right. 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 So, all right. So you're trying to get to know people, and that is its own like, step back and just starting to get an understanding of reality, of a different reality. And then you had hopes of not just going to school and in college to play football, but you had higher hopes.
Yeah, I thought, just like everything else, when we talk about the allegory of the cave, and I'm gonna go back to that because I live off that. When I was growing up, people told me if you ever wanted to be successful, you had to play ball. And that
Right.
was either football or basketball. And that was the way of success, or you become a drug dealer. They didn't tell you to become a drug dealer, but that was the model of money.
Right.
And so, to not be a drug dealer, you do what you have to do to make money by becoming a successful athlete. And so that was the journey. I really didn't come to school to become any particular career driven goal. Came here because I was going to play ball, go to the league, and take care of my family.
Mhm.
Um, During my senior year or my junior year, I tore my MCL, um, and then no, it was my senior year, and then I had to play with a torn MCL all season based off the time that I had the injury, couldn't redshirt, and so played the whole season with a torn MCL. Had surgery after the season, and it changed the trajectory of where I thought I was going in my life. But I knew I was not going back to my community in West Palm Beach, Florida, just to go back home to go work a 9 to 5 job at
Yeah.
you know Walgreens or something. I wanted to try to take advantage of the opportunity that was in front of me, so I did start to focus a little bit more on my career and went to work, and that led me to working with juveniles in the correctional facility, and then that led to working with children and families, and I did that for over 17 years.
So you went into when what's that career called? It's like child services or child
Social service.
social services. So it and child social services. You came to a new came out of a cave again, right, to learn a new perspective. And you've shared some of this in different groups with different people. But what you realized is that the children only knew or were learning what the environment or the culture they were growing up in.
Mhm.
I think is what you've shared with me before. So what are like two or three realizations through that 17 years where you're like, oh, well, this is still recording and Michael is gone. So let's see if he gets logged back in. This is one of those things. There he is.
So what happened?
I don't know what happened either. It was great. So we took a brief intermission.
Mhm.
So Michael's back. So what I was getting at is there's probably like three or four things that got you thinking differently about how you think because you said essentially you want to make an impact in a certain way, and then you probably came to the realization like, oh, the impact that I actually want to make, I don't think can be made at this level. It needs to be made at this level. So describe or go into a little bit during that 17 years what your awarenesses became during that time period, and then what caused you to transition out of that 17 years into something new.
Yeah, I when I first started working with young people, I just had an aspiration that I wanted to show them something that the world that I came from, that things could be different. And so it was really just all about working with young teenage boys, and definitely those that was headed down the wrong path. And so I did that. I worked in juvenile detention centers. I actually worked in Shawnee County Correctional Facility for youth. And then that led to other things. Like when you start working with those youth, you start realizing that it's not just a behavior issue. Because of the trauma, then it becomes more of a mental health issue. And so then we started to dabble into, okay, well, let's not just address this behavior. Let's talk about the root cause of what's causing this behavior, and that is the trauma based off some of the environmental situations that these kids come from. And
Right.
so when we started to do that, we moved into a different field. I started working in the correctional facilities, and I went to go work for a foster care agency. Um, and when I started working with the foster care agency, we started to really understand what was happening at home for some of these children,
Right.
right? And in some of these environments, the same ones I kind of grew up in, if not worse. And then we said, okay, well, what are we doing to um, solve the problem for the children, but what are we doing for the adults? Because the adults are trying to make a way for their children, but if they can't make a way for their children, then the children feel the effects of the adult behavior. And
Right.
so it just trickles down into this behavior. So then when I was paying attention to all of these different things as we were growing and developing, and I said, man, like, all right, so if these are the causes, right, you go all the way down to the root. An environment has, and we talk about culture, an environment has a direct effect on who you become. And if
Hmm.
you are not afforded a particular opportunity, it makes it hard for you to then take that path out of the cave. But
Hmm.
if everything around you is this particular thing, then that's all that you know. And so if the parents are struggling and they can't figure out a next wave, then that trickles down to the children. And when that child grows up, then he repeats that cycle. But it all starts in the environment that you sometimes grow up in,
Hmm.
whether that be home environment or physical environment. And so when I started to look at all of that, I said, man, then what do we do to improve community?
Yes.
And so when we started to look at the communities, what were the factors? Well, those factors of those cultures that we talk about, people are typically in a survival culture. And when you're in a survival culture, then what is the survival culture? Low access to um, low access to food, low access to opportunity, low access to funding, low access to all of these different things to where the family typically struggles because they can't find a way out of this cave.
Right.
And so, one of the things that I tried to do with the understanding of all of that was okay, well, let's look at how we can improve the root cause of all of these things, which will make life better for people in a long run. And instead of just being the person to be reactive to the behavior that is presented in front of us, how do we be proactive? And if we can't save these individuals today, because there are programs that are out there, how do
Right.
we create a program that's going to be proactive to these behaviors that can improve the community overall and provide some different resources that will allow a person access to climb out of that cave or take
Right.
that path out of that cave if so they choose. But again, so that's why we do what we do today.
So when you say we do what we do, so who is we? What is that? What is that entity?
Yeah, so Omni Circle. So in my own journey, of learning about the cave, going through some things, all of those things I just mentioned. It took for me too, like a little bit of shift in my own self. I knew that I was on a path to try to make a better way for myself, but I still had to find that passion and purpose within myself to really have it click for me to actually go after the thing. I think most people know what they should be doing,
Yeah.
but they'll never go out and actually do it, right? It has to be
Yeah.
something that pushes you off the cliff to make you take that leap.
Yes.
For me, in 2015, I moved away from Topeka. I was like, I have to do something different because I want more for myself. And I took a leap to go after her thing, but I didn't have the passion to really pursue the thing. In 2015, after I moved, 6 months later, I lost my mom to cancer.
Hmm.
And when I lost my mom to cancer, that was the thing that kind of sparked the fire within me because I tell people all the time, like, they say one thing, you'll never know what it's like to lose a parent until you lose your own, right? But
Right.
then two, when my mom passed away, everybody loved my mom and they all said that she was the life of the party. And that is true. But what they also didn't talk about was how she was a server and she provided a lot of service to people in the community. And that bothered me. And so, being the youngest of four, I had set my own path by saying I was going to be the one that allows her name to live on for the good things that she did in service.
Yeah.
And so I was listening to Les Brown one day, and he said, imagine being at a funeral home and you're walking down the aisle, and when you get to the casket and you look in the casket and you see yourself, he was like, what do you want people to say about you? And this is when I
Mm.
was going through my mourning of my mother.
Yeah.
And I said, I didn't want people to look at me and just say he's a great football player or he was a great basketball player. I wanted to leave a legacy.
Yeah.
And so I started my journey, as Les Brown said, I didn't want my dreams to die with me and be another person that makes the graveyard rich, right? I
Yeah.
wanted to go out and actually achieve the thing. So I started that journey and we created a framework for this thing that we call Omni Circle now,
Yeah.
which is an organization that's designed to unite and strengthen communities by adding value to the personal and professional development of our members to promote economic prosperity through entrepreneurship.
Yeah. And
It
yeah.
is a journey, right?
Yeah. And it's, I want to again add perspective real quick. Is you had mentioned a couple things about passion and purpose and lighting the fire.
Mhm.
And so many times, you and I have engaged in this kind of discussion that people have an eye. They're like, "Oh, I would love to do this, right? I'd love to do this, or it must be nice, or look at all this success." And so, but
Mhm.
they don't understand actually what was happening behind the scenes. And some people call it grind, and then there's this grind culture that people are averse to. But I would say, and I don't know about you, but like if you're going after something, I don't look at things. People talk about it as being a sacrifice to get what you want. I talk
Mhm.
about making an investment to get what you want. So you made, and again, I don't think you share this very much, but when you and I were talking one time at Soulfire, you're like, all right, man. Well, it was, I don't even know, it was like 7:30 or 8 or something like that. And you're like, all right, well, I got to go. I'm like, where are you going? You're like, I go to my nighttime job now. I'm like, wait, what? And you're like, yeah, I work at night from this shift to this shift. And then I get like an hour or two of like a nap. And then I go, I'm starting from ground floor Omni, right? So then I got to go make all my connections from this time it was like 10 or 11, and then I go do this job from like 11 to whatever, and then I do like a short term. There's like three jobs that you were working at the same time
Right.
because of the passion and the purpose and the vision what you were trying to create, that you were willing to invest in a ridiculous amount of energies to see an end result.
Yeah.
And so now what has happened is, and what you've built and what you're continuing to build, because I won't even say what you built because that sounds like something's finished,
Mhm.
that I don't think it's ever going to be finished. I think there's going to be an evolution of the things that you're working on. Is at least you have the evolution of the machine of the building that it's going.
Mhm.
And so I think sometimes when you don't share, like when you're talking about the personal and professional and entrepreneurship growth and culture change, is that if people don't hear that part that you share about, like, this is what I sacrificed or this is what I invested to build this thing, is that there's a lot of people who say, I want a thing, but they aren't willing to make that kind of investment
Or commitment,
or commitment. Yeah.
I just posted something the other day about there are three D's they talk about, and I put a fourth D because I think vision is part of that. Not just make it dream, but it's like dream, desire, determination, and um, dedication.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's a space where when you have a strong vision, then all of those other D's kind of come into place. The passion, right? The
Yeah.
desire to want to get it done, the commitment, which is the determination. You know what I mean?
Right.
All of these things that you have to do. And I think when I define my why, which is now I know every day I wake up, I get to do it for my mother, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's nothing is more important than that to me right now. Like I don't care
Right.
about material things. I want to make sure that I see this thing through so that way in this time that I'm on this earth, I can make an impact, right? But the commitment to it, right? That was the part that I don't really talk about a whole lot because and it maybe what people don't see, like you said, I worked two full-time jobs and then I did the part-time trying to build Omni in between.
Yeah.
But I worked 8 to 5, and then I had from 5 to 7 to work on Omni, and then 7 o'clock I drove to Kansas City to be there by 8,
Yeah.
and then I worked from 8 to 6 in the morning,
Yeah.
and I drove back here by 7,
Yeah.
took a shower, and then I was at work at 8 again.
Yeah.
You know? And
Yeah.
so I did that for 2 years. But even though it was hard, I was committed.
Yeah.
I was determined that I was going to see this through. And but my why is what drove me. They typically say when you have your your purpose, let your passion be your fuel, right?
Yes.
And so
Yes.
my passion was fueling me every day. Like as hard as I worked, it never felt as hard because I knew what I was trying to achieve, which was my vision. And I'm still on that path, right? Got some help now, but
Yes.
but it looks a lot different. But
Yeah.
in the time being, when you want to create something, I'm a firm believer, man, that hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard. They've always
Right.
told us that, but when you get older and you really understand that the only reason that people are succeeding at high levels is because they're willing to work harder than anybody else. They're willing to stay committed to a thing, not multiple things, right?
Right.
But they allow that one thing to be the domino effect to the growth of the thing that they're building, and it
Right.
will build. I think in Darren Hardy's compound effect, right? He says small, smart choices done consistently over time is what creates radical differences.
That's
And if
right.
you keep giving up in the midst of the thing, you'll never get there. So I just stayed committed to the vision. I'm still committed to the vision, and I've been watching this thing compound over time. And
Yeah.
so as long as we keep doing that and keep doing the small things well, we'll continue to see big results. So I think that we got a big future ahead of us.
Yeah.
We just got to keep working.
So now Omni, so there is Omni Circle is the framework.
Mhm.
So describe to me what Omni Circle like I've been seeing posts on Facebook as far as you inviting people to different types of groups to be engaged for education, because you correct me if I'm wrong, but the idea is, again, we'll take it all the way back to the beginning, is
Mhm.
the idea is to change culture through behavior and change culture through education that changes behavior because they think differently about how they think, and now they have new choices to make that will then feel the ripple effect through their kids and their kids, right? So you have programs for people wanting to start up businesses, people that are running businesses. And I know those because you've talked about those most to me, but I know there's other programs in there. So give me an idea with like the suite of impact programs that you're rolling out, that you're enrolling people into.
Yeah. So again, as we talk about, one of the things that we're trying to do is there's two paths that we typically say in life, and this is the whole thing when we did the testing of the program, right?
Mhm.
Leadership versus management. And so in life, you can go two ways when you get faced with a fork in the road. Sometimes culture can lead you down a path of just being mediocre, being average, right? Like,
Yeah.
everybody's telling you who to become. All the outside factors are dictating who you become. If you want to become a worker, it will put you right through the system to allow you to be that thing. And then you will always be in a space of not finding your happiness because you've never really reached your full potential.
Right.
On the other end, then you have this ability to be great. And in order to be great, we need to become more educated on who we are as individuals. And so what we do here at Omni Circle is when you decide that you are ready to be great, then we want to provide you with the tools to help you take that journey towards being great. So one of
Yeah.
the things that we do, which is our whole person leadership, mentally, physically, emotionally, we wrap around services for you can become a better person and make better decisions, be more intentional, have a vision, right? Understand where you're going. And again, the commitment to the thing. So those things that we just talked about. And
Yeah.
then once you are in the space where you're starting to wrap yourself around community, you're building your confidence, you're learning how to use your voice, then we want to help you help other people find their voice. So then you become a
Mhm.
leader in your own right. And so the goal is to help people who need help start their journey. And when they decide to start their journey, help them find the confidence in the thing that they want, or to define the vision to begin with the end in mind of who they want to become and then set them on their path, but make them their own leader in their own right to be intentional about taking those steps towards the path.
Yeah.
And then when they're ready to say, man, I have this passion and I want to turn this passion into something that makes me money,
Yeah.
then we have the entrepreneurship to say, okay, well, let's turn that into something that you can serve in the community with, and you can be a benefit to the greater good. So that's kind of the journey. So we say we connect, collaborate to create, which is literally what we're trying to say is we're taking people from survival into creation, and
Yes.
using your creative force to get what you want.
Yeah. And I think that things that you and I have talked about is a lot of people that say they want to get better, that say they want to do a thing, they constantly stay in the blame mode or the circumstance mode.
Victimization.
Um, they're victims,
Mhm.
right? They are victims, and so the reason why I can't get a better job is because dot dot dot. The reason why they won't hire me is because of dot dot dot. The reason why this I am the way I am dot dot dot.
Mhm.
So every circumstances or somebody else's fault with the reason why they current are in their current station in life. And I think through your programs, any of them, in reality, you take them on a journey that they actually have to come with a acceptance of personal responsibility that they are where they are because the decisions that they've made up until this time has put them in that place, right? So
What
speak to that a little bit about like there's a transition there that they need to make in order to become the person and professional they need to be.
Yeah, I think that's just the realization that you've been brainwashed to some degree. I hate to say it, but I mean, if we all come from a form of culture as some form of cave, and whether you have the privilege of someone giving you a better cave that puts you at a better place because they put themselves in a better place, but not everybody is afforded to that, and so I think you also have to take the time to just realize what cave you come from. And it's not typically your fault on the decisions that you make in life every day because you just didn't know. You did what you understood, and I always tell myself that person that you was telling me to describe with the gold chains and the gold teeth and the dreadlocks and all those different things, that was a me mirroring my culture. I was
That's
I
right.
was I was watching what I saw and I was becoming what I thought was the ideal of success.
Yeah.
And so that's not a fault to me. That's what I grew up in.
Yes.
But when you know better, you do better, right? And so I got to a place where I started to understand actual life and what life looked like in the cave. And I was like, oh, I have to make some different decisions. If
Yeah.
I ever want to be to that level of success, I have to now recognize that there are things about my culture that, again, haven't always been the best serving to me, right?
Right.
There are some things that I will never give up about my culture, right? Because
Right.
I understand that is who made me to the person that I am today. And
Right.
so there are goods and bads, and I tell people it's like eat the meat and spit out the bones, man. Like not everything is going to be good for you in every way that people provide it to you, but to get to that place where we're culture changing in Omni, one of the things that we try to do is like, I feel like the key to really understanding, like understanding is the key to know thyself, right? When you know yourself, you know your surroundings, you can really get to a place that gives you wisdom to make the right decision, right? To
Yeah.
make the right choice.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times, like myself, I came from an environment that taught me how to make choices based off dangerous situations,
Yes.
right? So I definitely knew how to live in my environment and based off those experiences. But what I couldn't couple that with was the knowledge. And so I feel like the key to wisdom is to couple your experience with your knowledge. If you have experience plus knowledge, it equals wisdom.
Yeah.
But a lot of times, just as well as I know, some people don't have a lot of experience, which is why they don't really hire people at jobs. They have all the book smarts, but they don't know how to apply that to the experience. Or somebody
Right.
has all the experience, but they really don't understand what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
Until you put those two together, you become more wise, and then your decisions become better on how you maneuver in this world. So for
Yeah.
me, I had a lot of experience, little knowledge of the world, but now that I'm taking the time to invest in my learning along with what I experience, it's putting me in a better place.
Yeah. And when you're talking about like culture and you're talking about like we mirror what we know.
Hmm.
And so when I think about that, it's one of the things I like to talk about the most is because I would say inadvertently or passively, we are investing in the education of the life we don't want.
Hmm.
And what I mean by that is because we don't know how we should be investing our attention, right? Our eye tension, our ear tension, is that we casually do it, and casually doing something causes casualties,
Hmm.
casualty of your future. And so what I see is that people mimic, and you've probably heard this quote before. It's like, does life mimic art or does art mimic life?
Hmm.
And so when people are programming themselves through their current friend or culture group, through the TV, through the music they listen to, through what they read, with the conversations they have,
Hmm.
is that they are their behaviors mimic their beliefs of those things culturally that are true.
Yeah.
And until they have a conversation or they listen to this podcast or they have a conversation with somebody like you or I or somebody else that gets them to think differently, they remain in that cave.
Yeah.
And I think you've said this before. The problem becomes is when you or I, and we've both experienced this, is that we're outside a cave, maybe the current cave that they're in, but we're still in our own all the time, right? So we're no better than anybody else, right? But we're outside that cave and we go back into the cave and we say, hey guys, listen, there's this different way to think about things. Tell me about that. What happens to the person that goes back and says, hey, there's a whole different reality out here, guys? What happens?
Yeah. People don't want to hear that, man. I think that's you're shaking up. You're trying to shake up their world to the thing that they feel like they understand. So when you become what we like, probably what we would consider ourselves a truth teller, right? Someone who can give you the truth and not the truth and not the lie. The illusion is the lie, right? But when you're being introduced to the truth, and I tell people the lie is always better than the truth, right? For those who don't want to seek truth. But when you're coming and telling people about themselves and maybe about the way that things could be different, how can you really pers- how can they really perceive what you're telling them when they've never experienced it,
Right.
right? And so I think that's the hard part for a lot of this education that we're providing is that, and I typically tell people, and I feel like I'm the switch, I'm not the light bulb.
Right.
And what I mean by that is I can flicker on the switch, and it doesn't mean that it's going to turn on the light. It's another mechanism that sometimes life experiences then makes this light comes on because you can then process the information that I provided to you. And so
Yes.
you're not going to take what I tell you and go out here and just change yourself, but life will teach you. But if you have the information to recognize and you heard something before and you say, "Oh, that's what that was that he was trying to tell me." And
Right.
now I see, and that's the thing that turns on the light. And
Yeah.
so when you are trying to provide information to people who may not be able to see what you have seen, you have to be careful because then those people will conspire what I typically say on the other side of the spectrum. As you are becoming a leader, and you are trying to help people become who they need to become, on the other side of that, when ego gets in the way, then people are becoming victims that we just talked about. And as a victim, then that creates that crab in the bucket mentality,
Yeah.
right? And so then now I'm no longer trying to get to the place where we can help each other. I'm only in the place where I can help myself. And I'm
Right.
going to pull you down just as well because I'm trying to get to the places that you are. But you like, I'm already showing you the path. I'm giving it to you.
Right.
But that typically is what happens is we see people that may not have an understanding. And I'm gonna say this really quick because I'm working with a couple youth right now. The hard part for me in a lot of this is just imagine yourself being a child, right? And somebody telling you you can go do all these great things, but you've never had the experience of any of these great things that they're telling you. So how can you know what it's like to be an adult if you've never been an adult? Right?
Yeah.
How can you know what it's like to pay bills if you've never paid bills?
Right.
Right? So that's kind of where it's at. Even though people are adults, there's still parts of life that they just haven't experienced yet. And we have to be careful on how much and how fast we give them this information so that way you don't become someone that they despise.
Yeah, I think you and you probably we've talked about that disease of projecting. Like we learned all these things, and we're like, like we just wanted to tell everybody all the time, all the stuff, and they're like, oh my gosh, walk the other way. It's Michael, right? Oh my gosh, it's Anthony. Right. So I think you and I are in a place where like our passion meets our purpose and our time investment and our behaviors match up with what we say we want. Right. And what you want with Omni Circles for people to discover, know thyself. Once they start to open up to knowing them thyself, they can then start to look at their current cultural habits that they may not have been aware of. Then once they're aware, they can you have programs and you have systems and processes of way to think about how to transition out of their more or less old man or old woman or old mind into their new mind, which then they can build a better, be on a better personal growth stage, which then leads to better professional growth stage, which then leads, if they're an employee, it could lead to raises, new jobs, whatever it may be. And if they're an entrepreneur, they start a business and it's doing $20,000 of revenue a year, and now a couple of years later, it's 300, it's 500, and like you and I talked about, wouldn't it be cool if we were able to get around the country and teach people how to do businesses that have never done $1 million before or more, and teach these young businesses how to think differently about how to think personally and professionally to grow this way. But the whole purpose wasn't just revenue. It's actually to change culture so that the kids that you were serving as youths
Yeah.
are no longer impacted. So that's what's really cool about it, is that in result, if people really don't understand what you're trying to do, it ultimately serves the kids.
Yeah.
That's what you're trying to make an impact in.
Yeah, it's a cycle,
Yeah.
and then when you change the cycle, when you break the chains of the cycle, you create new cycles. And
Yeah.
so over time, when right now, if you don't have that space of a consistent flow of recycling of leadership, then there's no pipeline for that, right? But when
Right.
it becomes a pipeline, so if the kids today don't have a form of leadership that they see that they want to model after, eventually when there becomes new models to follow, then the kids that come behind them will have the models to follow, then they become the models, and then now it's a new cycle and a generation of achievers. And that looks very different of how it affects, going all the way back to what I said, environment,
Yeah.
which is the root, right?
Yeah.
Community, which is the root. And
Yeah.
so if you get to a lot of that, you solve a lot of problems in the community instead of putting a band-aid on something. You're actually fixing the problem, or stopping the bleeding.
Okay. All right, so we're going to wrap up. If there were something that you could share in 2 minutes, kind of like your Hail Mary, something that you just want to share in the last 2 minutes that maybe we haven't talked about, as far as a different way to think, how to think, or whatever it is, what would you share?
Um, hmm. I think I'm gonna go back to your quote that, which is one of those things that we saw in the shop. Change your mind, change your life. And people think that to do great things in life requires so much work, but all you really have to do is change the way that you think. If you change the way that you think about things, then you will achieve so much more. If you change the way that you think about yourself, you will change so much more. Like we talk about this, people are fearful of things because the way that they think about themselves. But the day that you change that, you're no longer fearful and you believe that, then you will no longer carry fear. If you believe that you're going to achieve great things in life, if you change the way that you think about it, you're going to achieve great things in life because you believe it. And so I think life is really, people will say, well, it's not that simple. Well, it kind of is, because when you do change your mind, everything is a domino effect to that one process that you started with. And so I would leave people with that and just say that's been one of the biggest things in my life of achieving is setting intention on the things that I desire in life and knowing and believing in my heart that I can achieve those things and believing in myself. So that's changing the way I think so that way I can change the way I live in this world. And
All
so
right, man.
hopefully I can that offers some type of guidance to somebody as their journey as
Yeah.
they take their journey towards success.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate it. I really care about you. I care about Danielle. I appreciate your guys' friendship. I appreciate our future together as we're both casually and intentionally seeing how we can always provide value to communities.
Mm-hmm.
So I look forward to that relationship as it continues to grow. And I know that I've gotten value from what you've said today. So I know that other people listening to this will get value as well. So I appreciate your time. And
Well,
that's it, everybody. That's what we got for Michael today. All
thank
right.
you guys.